No composer who has ever visited the Indonesian island of Bali can fail to be profoundly inspired and changed by the extraordinary richness of their culture, religious beliefs, and of course their music. The very sound of the Balinese gamelan, with its incredible percussion instruments and unique tunings, the virtuosity of their performers, the bright colours of the dancers' costumes, and the smells of the spices and kretek cigarettes all blend together to create an overwhelming cultural experience. The rich mythology which lies at the root of the hundreds of traditional dances, ceremonies, and temple festivals goes back thousands of years, and survives today almost unchanged as a genuine, living, ancient culture. Probably the most impressive of all of these rituals is the Balinese Hindu cremation ceremony known as Ngaben. Ngaben is performed in order to release the soul of the departed into the upper realm, where it will wait to be reborn. In Balinese Hindu theology, it is believed that in the lower realm, evil spirits compete to capture the soul of the departed, and that a proper Ngaben can help to ensure that he is transported into the upper realm and escape the forces of evil in his future life. The whole ceremony is a joyous and exuberant affair where the mourners celebrate their loved one's eventual rebirth and entry into the upper realm. Any expression of grief or sadness is a private matter for them. The elaborate ritual takes many weeks to prepare. It is also expensive, and so often several families get together to arrange a kind of group Ngaben for a number of departed souls. First of all, a petulangan must be constructed in which the bodies will be burnt. This is usually a coffin in the shape of a bull or some mythical animal, and a huge temple-like structure, always brightly coloured and adorned with spices, flowers, food offerings, wood carvings, and other beautiful objects, which the villagers have painstakingly prepared over several weeks. A suitably auspicious day is chosen for the ceremony, and when it arrives, the villagers assemble, all dressed in their most lavish and colourful attire, to form a long line for the procession. The petulangan is then carried on poles laid across the shoulders of several strong men. Gamelan instruments are brought along too, and the long and noisy procession sets off. First they proceed to the river or to the sea for the purification of the souls of the departed. Eventually the procession reaches the cremation ground, where the entire funeral pyre, with all its beautiful decorations, wood carvings and spices, is set alight. At this moment it seems as if the entire village has exploded into music and dancing. As the corpses burn in this giant inferno, the gamelan plays the traditional Balinese battle song, the Pelaganjur, which symbolizes the soul's struggle to be free of the evil spirits in the lower realm and reach the calm of the upper realm. During the next week or so, mourners are permitted to sit beside the smouldering embers and grieve privately. Later the families collect the ashes and take them to the sea, where they are returned to the elements. I myself visited Bali in 1981, and although I experienced many different temple festivals, rituals, and dance performances, I never had the good fortune to experience Ngaben live. But shortly after my return to Europe, I happened to see a film showing the entire ceremony, and which had passed through many of the villages I knew from my time there. Coincidentally, soon after seeing this film, I was asked to write a work for the Hungarian percussion quartet Amadinda for a tour of England we would undertake together in 1989, and so my thoughts immediately turned to Ngaben as the perfect basis for this new percussion quartet. The result was Village Burial with Fire, a work in which I stopped at nothing to exploit the incredible virtuosity of this exceptional ensemble. But although the idea of Ngaben was very much in my mind when I conceived the work, there is no specific programmatic connection with the ceremony, but more a generalized response to the mythological and spiritual aspects of the ritual and Balinese culture in general. The opening chanting, for example, uses a purely phonetic text which has no specific meaning at all, but is vaguely reminiscent of certain styles of Balinese drama. In just one very small instance, there is a specific reminiscence of the famous Balinese Ketchak dance, where men sit in a circle on the ground, imitating monkeys, and one man goes into trance and dances barefoot on burning coals. Certain combinations of instruments also recall the Balinese cheng-cheng. These are the bright-sounding cymbals whose continuous clattering is such a characteristic feature of Balinese gamelan music. On a more metaphysical level, one phenomenon which is common to almost all ancient Asiatic cultures is that of transformation: physical, mental, spiritual, and supernatural. And this is frequently represented in my music of the 80s by different types of sliding tones, sound modulations, and glissandi. In Ngaben, of course, there are all kinds of transformations, both physical, such as the gradual disintegration of the pyre and the corpse as it burns, and spiritual, such as the passage of the souls to the upper realm. In village burial, these are symbolized in several different ways. For example, the glissandi on the piano strings, the bowing of a cymbal or temple bell placed on a timpani head as its pitch is being modulated by the pedal, the undulations of a large thunder sheet, or the distinctive glissandi of a very special instrument I shall describe in a moment. There are also many examples of timbral transformations, where the decaying sound of one instrument gradually dissolves into the emerging sound of another, similar to the electronic technique of morphing. But one aspect of composing for percussion which at that time I remember feeling particularly strongly about was the use of rolls or tremolandi, especially on keyboard instruments such as the xylophone and marimba. I was often irritated by the constant use of tremolandi in so much of the marimba repertoire of that time, especially the Japanese. It had always seemed to me that this kind of writing was contrary to the nature of the instrument and was simply an attempt to disguise the fact that the instrument is incapable of sustaining a sound. And indeed, one of the things I had noticed about the gamelan percussion music in both Bali and Java was the complete absence of any tremolandi at all. The rhythms in each polyphonic layer of the music are perfectly conceived to match the natural resonance of the instruments for which they are intended, so that instruments with a very short resonance, like the gambang, that's the Javanese xylophone, plays fast and rather ornamental music. Those with a medium resonance, like the bronze sarons, play medium-fast music, whilst slower-paced music is entrusted to the gongs with their longer resonance. Percussion instruments, by their very nature, are non-sustaining, and therefore, at that time, I had always tried to conceive my percussion music in such a way that would not require any such artificial means of sustaining sounds. So as I started to think about this new percussion quartet, I immediately began to consider all the possible natural ways in which sounds can be sustained. These include bowing cymbals and kritals, rubbing temple bells, stroking guiros, swirling metal shakers and maracas, shaking a sistrum or a string of sleigh bells, and even bowing piano strings. The piano, of course, is also a non-sustaining instrument, and so the same problem applies. Consequently, in village burial, there are in fact only 5 xylophone or marimba tremolandi in the whole piece, and these are only there to perform the specific function of transforming the decay of one sound into the emergence of another. So my more proactive thoughts about how to sustain percussion sounds in a natural way led me to imagine and design a rather special instrument which, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, I would then have to build myself. The inspiration for this instrument actually came from the simple idea of stroking a guiro. I imagined a guiro which was not just a few centimeters long, but was as long as a large xylophone, and when stroked would have a very definite pitch. The result was an instrument called the microzyl. This name comes from xylos, the Greek word for wood, and micro from micro-interval. The instrument has 2 distinct forms, the straight microzyl and the elliptical microzyl. The straight microzyl consists of 4 keyboards, each having 36 microtuned wooden dowels laid over a resonating box. These dowels are all tuned just a few cents apart from each other, so that the overall range of all 36 dowels on a single keyboard is approximately one tone. Each keyboard has a different range and tessitura. The upper two keyboards both have an overall range of just 3/4 of a tone, the third keyboard has a range of a whole tone, and the fourth of a tone and a quarter. And the overall range of all 4 keyboards, with their different tessiturae, covers just under an octave. The elliptical microzyll has just one keyboard, but is somewhat larger, having 47 pieces of dowel and tuned in a very different way. Unlike the even glissandi produced by the straight microzylls, the pitch curve of the 47 dowels of the elliptical microzyll is an elliptical curve, with very small intervals at the bottom end of the instrument gradually widening to much larger intervals at the top. In fact, the interval between the upper 2 dowels is almost a perfect fourth. This produces an almost comic sounding glissando and thus has a very different character. Both the straight and the elliptical microzylls are designed not to be struck, but to be stroked, recalling the idea of an enormous pitched guiro. The result turned out to be extraordinarily expressive, with the wailing and sighing of the straight microzylls representing the private inner laments of the mourners, and the often comic-sounding glissandi on the elliptical microzyll symbolizing the more public and extrovert expression of the mourners' celebrations and joy. Village Burial with Fire is dedicated to Amadinda Percussion Group and is a testament to my profound admiration for this wonderful ensemble.